Hello, and welcome to None of the Above. My name is Steve Nemirovsky, and I'm your host. None of the Above is a political program that focuses on the dysfunction and polarization in our political world, and at the same time tries to offer solution sets to help us become less dysfunctional and less polarized. On None of the Above, we don't take position on issues, and we actually spend a great deal of time on process. So we don't look at the pros and cons of immigration or some of the testy issues of the day and take positions, but we look at the process that surrounds them. So in the case of immigration, we've looked at some citizen lobbying groups, how they've come together, what they find the climate to be when they get out to Washington, et cetera. And then we try to get you, our guests, our viewers, involved in the process and find places for you to get involved, find the issues of importance, and then jump into those issues. So for the next two shows, we're going to shift a little bit because the next two shows are going to be issue-oriented. We're not going to take positions, but we're going to really jump into an issue and try and give you perspective and as much factual perspective as possible, let you decide how important this issue, and then let you decide how to get involved. So the particular issue that we're going to focus on for the next two shows relates to pensions, and in this case, the pensions for states and municipal governments. I don't know how many of you have been reading articles over the past year or so, or even longer, about the situation with state and municipal pensions, but they are really suffering financially. Many of them are greatly underwater and not having much hope of catching up anywhere in the near term. And because of that, there are a series of solution sets that are being utilized to try and get them caught up, whether that be through ballot measures, legislation, sometimes litigation. And because of all this, and it is such an important issue, again, I thought we should take some time, and we're going to do that on the next two shows, to educate you a bit on the issue, and again, let you decide if you want to jump into this one or not. So for today's show, we're going to visit with our friends from Ballotpedia, who have set up a subset of Ballotpedia, which they're now calling Policypedia. And on Policypedia, they've identified 4 issues to educate the public on, one of which happens to be this pension issue. So we're going to have a group discussion with the Policypedia arm of Ballotpedia to talk about pensions. We're also going to talk to an expert from Colorado who spent some time analyzing the situation in Colorado. And I think that'll give you a good dichotomy. So we'll go from talking about the problem at the national level, and then we'll digress to a particular state level, in this case, Colorado. Then on our next program, we're going to zero in on what's happening in Illinois. Illinois is undisputably in the worst shape of any state in the country with respect to its state's pensions. The size of their hole and the percentage of their hole really dwarfs, I think, even who's in second place. Illinois has tried to step up and look at solution sets, and one of the leaders on that is Representative Nekritz, actually a good friend of mine, a terrific legislator. We're going to talk to her about what Illinois did, and not so much, again, in terms of their particular solution, but how they went about solving the problem and how they made it a bipartisan solution. One of the things we like to do on our show is look at how we can get bipartisan solutions and how we can get the dialogue to the center. So before we start today's show, what I'd like to do is take a quick look at a map that our friends at Policypedia prepared, and it'll give you a bit of a flavor for the problem. So let's take a look at the map. So I hope you can see the color codings here. We've got the map of the United States and Alaska and Hawaii over here. And we have ranges of 40% to 60% funded. So in other words, if one of these states has a target of X, they currently only are predicted to have 40 to 60% of X available when needed. I don't exactly know how they define when needed, but that's something you're going to find out when you go to Policypedia, obviously. And then some of the states are doing much, much better. They're in the 90 to 100% funded category. So we've got a swing from the gray states like Kansas. I told you Illinois, I think, is the worst in the country. I think Connecticut is second worst in the country. And then we've got, again, some 90% to 100% funded. The purples, we've got Washington State, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Tennessee, North Carolina. You'll notice there are not many in this 90 to 100% category. And even the ones in the 90 to 100% category have caught up significantly over the last couple of years. As you may know, the stock market has done particularly well. It's been a good time to be investing. So I would suggest to you that these states were probably further apart a few years ago. Now, one of the key issues that you're going to learn about, and I think we discuss in literally every segment here, comes to how you define the problem. In other words, how has Policypedia decided that Washington State is 90 to 100% funded, whereas New Mexico 60 to 70% funded, etc. And you'll see there's a great argument as to how to calculate these numbers based upon rate of return. And I don't know if you have your own retirement plans or when you're doing your own financial planning and you have a goal and you say to yourself, well, I'm going to set my goal. What is it going to take to get there? Am I going to have to earn 3% a year, 4% a year, 6% a year? How much am I going to have to earn for each year to get to my goal? What is the rate of return that I need? Well, you'll find that a lot of the people running these pensions are making assumptions that they are going to have a rate of return in the range of 7 or 8%. Now, I personally think that is fairly aggressive in today's environment, even though we had a very large stock run-up over the last year, and stocks have done fairly well since the Great Recession. We also did have the Great Recession, and we have to know that recessions are around the corner. So I personally think any plan that is counting on 7 and 8% return, and this would be over the long haul, 10, 20, 30 years, I personally think that's a bit aggressive. So people that are assuming they're going to earn that rate of return, they may say that they are more funded. Illinois may say we're more than 40 or 60% funded because we think we're going to earn a higher rate of return than does Policypedia. So it's a tricky issue, primarily because of the rate of return issue, and for some other elements that we're going to start talking about today in terms of how you define the problem, and once you define it, how you think of solving it.